Alright, welcome to Current Affairs Taiwan. I'm Donovan Smith, and I'm Donovan Smith. Michael Turton is on vacation on the East Coast again. He's getting in a little bit of a last summer fun before the semester starts. Alright, so I'm going to kick off. We've got a few things. I want to keep the show going here. So hopefully this will be a short one. We've got the Go timing, Terry Go, the Wen-je, and the Wang Jin-pyng meet. We've got polls, we've got the NPP as a new chair, and lots of speculation on what's going on with Huang Kuo-chang. And an interesting bit of diplomacy that Tsai Ing-wen has very consistently done. I thought I'd bring it up. She made a very clever play on words, I thought, this week. But it's typical of her style. So, alright, so we got Terry Go, Wen-je, and Wang Jin-pyng finally meet. Now, last week on the show we talked about how they were originally slated to potentially meet in Taoyuan, and then Wen-je started blathering on, and basically the other two shut him up. So now they finally met up. Basically, it was just simply, they posed for pictures, they sat together at an 823 commemoration event, and that's about it. They didn't actually converse much, they didn't meet privately. They didn't really, it seemed to be more there to feed the press's expectations than that the meeting was actually going to accomplish anything. Now, they of course don't actually physically need to meet. There's this really newfangled technology they might try working with called a telephone, so we'll see. Maybe they're talking and maybe they're not. But according to Wen-je, to Wang Jin-pyng, they are not talking much. Okay, the quote's in Chinese, but there's been a couple of articles this week. One of them where he says, Wang Jin-pyng says, I will meet with Go at any time, but there's nothing to discuss, or there's nothing going on. So there's no need to meet with Ke. The other thing he said, and this was today that came out again in the Chinese language press, is that Wang Jin-pyng was quoted as saying, there's bilateral talks going on, but not any multilateral talks. In other words, there's one-on-one talks with somebody else, but there's no discussions going on between all three of them. So it seems like Wang Jin-pyng is pouring some cold water on a lot of the speculation here. Now, I've been writing some stuff that hasn't really come out, but it might see the light of day. If you've followed me on Facebook, you've probably seen something to this effect. But so you've got these three players here, and what they all want are very different things. So let's start with, say, Terry Go. Terry Go is a man with a huge ego. He's a man who's hard-driven. He compares himself to Genghis Khan. This is a man who gets what he wants. He's one of the richest men in the world. He's one of the most successful men in the world. He's powerful, and he's getting on in his years. He's dated the models. He's done just about everything he wants, and the one thing it now appears that he wants is the presidency. So, you're Terry Go. You're getting old, you want to make a lasting legacy in your country, and he wants to be the president. Now, he got his ass handed to him in the primary, so that was a little bit of a setback. So he ran off to Japan and licked his wounds, and then came back, and there's been people preparing signatures for him to launch a presidential run. There have been fan groups popping up and holding activities and events, and so there is some momentum behind him running. Then, of course, everyone's talking about him partnering up possibly with Wang Jin-pyng and Wen-je. So he's still very much a player here. So the question is, now he keeps not declaring whether he's going to run or not. He's definitely not running it out. Now, I think more likely than not he is going to run. And this is something that Mike picked up on and shared, and I think this is quite interesting. In a survey released by Go's camp on Wednesday, 40.6% voted for Go, while 37.9% opted for Tsai, reported Now News. Now, the survey, based on an internal poll and several previous polls, suggested that the popularity of Han from the opposition, Kuomintang, has waned. The numbers suggest he would not rival ruling Democratic Progressive Party nominee Tsai if the vote were held today. Go's camp did not reveal details as to how the poll was carried out, withholding information such as sample selection, valid samples, and margin of error, wrote Now News. So, essentially, his camp is laying the groundwork for him to run. That's really what this smells like. And Michael Turton, he picked up on that. So, I think if he thinks he can win, or he has a decent shot at it, he's going to run. I mean, after all, Modzim told him he's going to win. So, if you've got a sea goddess on your side, you got to be feeling pretty good about your chances. So, now so he's got in his corner drive, he's got name recognition, he's an experienced businessman, and a lot of people want somebody who could juice up the economy. And of course, there's the example of Donald Trump, a businessman turned president. So he's got all of that, and he's got somewhere between 6 and 8 billion US dollars. So he can do pretty much whatever he wants. So that's where he's at. Now, Wang Jin-pyng is clearly interested in Terry Go. Wang Jin-pyng is running for president. He hasn't stopped running for president, even though he has not left the KMT. He pulled out of the KMT primary, which Han Kuo-yu won. So Han Kuo-yu is the KMT candidate for president. Wang Jin-pyng has repeatedly said he's still running to the end. So what's he up to? Well, we know, and as we've talked about on the show, he wants the presidency. In the past, he wanted the KMT chair, so that wouldn't be surprising if that's something that he wants. And he maybe would want to be the premier. Maybe. We don't know. Now, what he's got in his corner is he's the most well-known of the factional politicians. To say he's their leader is a little bit of an exaggeration, I think. But the fact of the matter is, if anybody can knock on any of these faction politicians' doors and people will run to open that door, it's for Wang Jin-pyng. So he's going to be listened to. He's widely respected among the factions. And so, now, the patronage factions are exactly that. They're interested in money and power, and they operate entirely on a system of patronage. Now, the KMT is right now much poorer than it used to. There's all kinds of institutional impediments where it used to be that they could basically bilk your local credit unions, and so now they're left with agricultural associations and things like that. Not a whole lot left. The old days when they were riding around in cars with guns and wild parties are really kind of on the wane, to put it mildly. So now, Wang Jin-pyng, if he wants to run for president, and he wants all these factional politicians, or at least a good chunk of them, to stand by him, which they did in the last election, but to really stand by him, he can't just do it, he just can't order them to do this. He can't just go, okay guys, I'm running for president, and all of you have to listen to me. They're going to go, well, no, why? What do we get? So he needs something to give them. He needs either a good shot at the presidency or a good shot at power, which of course premier or KMT party chair would be alternate paths to considerable power and ability to issue patronage to these guys. Or Terry Go's money. And let me say that again. Terry Go's money. So, now, Wang Jin-pyng wants Terry Go's money. I think that's pretty obvious. And so the big question then is, could the two of them work out a deal? Well, there's an obvious deal to be made. If Terry Go pumps in tons of money and he's willing to part with it, and that's a crucial question. He's a businessman. He's not used to splurging out, large sums of cash. But here's the question. He throws out a few tens of million or hundreds of millions of dollars. He's not going to spend it on anything else. Why not spend it on being the presidency? We'll see. Is he going to be willing to part with that money? If he does, and that money is flowing into these patronage factions, then that means that there is a big flow of energy and power behind Wang Jin-pyng and Terry Go, and that means that there's a ground game. This means that these politicians, there's already elected politicians on the ground, there's an experienced ground game of political operatives who can get out the vote and do all the normal things that need to get done. And existing legislators and elected officials all up and down the spectrum, from local governments all the way up to the legislature. So that means that Terry Go could be delivered a whole series of allies and existing politicians. So he'd have a nascent power base right there. So that's the deal there. What does Wang Jin-pyng get? Well, right now, if Terry Go is going to run as an independent or as a third party, because he can't run as a KMT candidate now that Huang Kuo-chang's run has already won the primary, then that means that what's he gonna so basically Huang Kuo-chang's won for the KMT primary. So Terry Go is going to run either as an independent or at the head of another party. And so he can't, under those circumstances, immediately give Wang Jin-pyng the KMT party chair. Now, he could offer him the premiership. There's another theory that a possible plan that could come out is what I've called the reverse takeover. I've talked about it on the show before, but in case you missed it, essentially the scenario works out something like this. Let's say that you have Terry Go starts to do very well, and there's a lot of momentum behind him, and his money out there and marketing is really working. You've got the factions on the ground who basically are openly defying their party, and if Huang Kuo-chang's candidacy starts to collapse, and it looks like Terry Go will win, or Terry Go wins the presidency, the KMT is going to be begging him to come back to the party, because what they want more than anything else, of course, is to be on the winning side. They want to be the winning party here. So then what's the price? Now keep in mind that Wu Duanyi he can stay in the position of party chair until I believe it's May of 2021. It's 2021. I think it's May. So he's still got a lot of time on the clock in theory. However, the party maybe will boot him out. I don't know. But the idea would be then is that the party would then beg Terry Go to come back, either as president or looking like he might become the president. They dump Han, and they dump Wu Duanyi, and then Wang Jin-pyng becomes the party chair. Now, big obstacles there. Wu Duanyi still has a term going to 2021. Huang Kuo-chang's got a very strong, solid core of support that doesn't look like they're going to abandon him anytime soon. We'll see, but there's a lot of people personally invested in him. He's losing the independents, he's losing a lot of the light blues, but he's still got a solid core. So he's not going anywhere yet. So there's two very big ifs there. Also, Wang Jin-pyng is hated by some very, very powerful figures in the KMT who do not trust him, particularly what were traditionally called the mainlanders, those from families who came over in 1949 with the government, the ROC government, the KMT. So they do not trust Wang Jin-pyng at all, and in polls, Wang Jin-pyng actually has higher favorability among DPP supporters than KMT supporters. To sort of put this all in perspective. So the reverse takeover is a tough one, but that could be one game that they're looking at here. But anyway, regardless here of which way this goes, now there's another possibility here, which I should mention, is a lot of people are saying that Wang Jin-pyng will never leave the KMT. I would have agreed with that statement up until the transitional justice and the party assets laws passed. he's been dealing with the mainlander elites in the party, and they've been shutting him down and defeating him over and over and over again. Ing-wen tried to get him thrown in jail and kicked out of the party, and so he probably has a lot of built-up resentment. Now, he's too smart of a politician to simply openly say this, but I'd be willing to bet it's there. So he is at an age where he's got basically nothing left to lose. This is probably his last stand, this election cycle. Same with Terry Go. Both of them, I don't think they're going to be big players in the next presidential, legislative, national elections. They're just going to be too old. So this is really it. So are these two going to work together, and would Wang Jin-pyng continue leading the party? Considering the KMT doesn't have the assets that it once did, and considering that it's saddled with a massive amount of liabilities. So from a cost perspective, not a branding perspective, obviously the KMT has a lot of legacy and people and stuff, but from a cost legacy, they've also got a large amount of costs associated with the party, pensions, they're overstaffed, all these liabilities, and the assets law has stripped them of a lot of their money. So if I were looking at it purely in financial terms, and you've got Terry Go's money coming in to fund something new, and it's a clean slate, so you don't have all these pensions and all these liabilities built in, and you can pick and choose exactly how many people, and as few people as you need to hire, rather than all the legacy employees that the KMT has, there's a strong case that a new party with a fresh start might make some sense. So I wouldn't totally rule it out. I think would much more likely to be, I think he'd prefer to stay in the KMT and become the party chair and finally achieve that personal victory. But if he thinks that road is blocked, would he consider an alternative? Who knows? Maybe. I don't know. So where does Wen-je fit into all of this? Well, we know that Wen-je wants to be president, but unlike the other two, he can wait. He's flat out said he doesn't really, he wants to continue being the Taipei mayor. He wants to finish his job. He's said repeatedly that he'll only run if he feels that the options aren't very good. He's already come out and said he backed Terry Go, except that he expressed some serious concerns about Terry Go's investments in China, which are massive, and he suggested that he'd probably have to divest those for the voters to trust him. So he's in play, I think, for the longer term, and I think his primary goal is to get things done. And he's starting this new political party, and I think it's all about he wants to just get things done. So he's willing to step away from being the president. He doesn't want the vice presidency. He says he was offered, although this was denied, he says he was offered the vice president / premiership, which we talked about last week. He wasn't interested in that. So he wants his party to move forward. He wants things to get done, and he wants to break the blue-green dynamic that exists right now. Those are his goals. Now, from Wang Jin-pyng's perspective, he doesn't bring very much to the table. I think that Wang Jin-pyng just views him as getting in the way, frankly. I think that he just doesn't want to deal with Ke is my strong suspicion. And as I quoted a little bit earlier in the show, obviously he's been saying things that suggest Ke's not in the mix. Terry Go, on the other hand, has some things I think that he would want from Ke. There's some polling which suggests that with Ke's support, he does better in the polling. And that could be significant. Now, to give you a specific example. All right, if you haven't checked it out, the aggregated polling on frozen garlic, the frozen garlic blog, essentially what Nathan Batto has done over at Frozen Garlic is fantastic. I'm deeply grateful for what he's doing. Essentially what he's doing is, because we know that the polling here in Taiwan is dubious, ranges from very, very dubious and highly partisan to kind of partisan and kind of dubious. So what he's done is he's taken all the different polls that come out and given them a weighting. In other words, okay, some polls are like 0.25, some are 0.5, 0.75, and some have a value of 1. So what he's doing is he's making sure that the polls that are less likely to be reliable are given less weight, and then he comes up with an aggregate score for all the polls. So the latest numbers are, in a head-to-head, Tsai, Han, and this is aggregated polls, Tsai 44.7, Han 36.4. In a three-way with Ke, Tsai 33.2, Han 29.3, Ke 22.7. That's an important number, 22.7 for Ke. Now, in a three-way with Go by himself, it's 33.8 for Tsai, 28.1 for Han, and 24.4 for Go. Now, if it's a three-way with Go allied with Ke, Tsai is 31.6, Han is 28.9, and Go allied with Ke is 27.4. So that puts them all within a 4-point range. In other words, that means that puts them, all three of them, all three basically within spitting distance of each other. And that's pretty significant. Now, if you look at that polling, that looks pretty strong. If Han continues to falter, he has been dropping in the polls steadily, and drip, 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 more bad news keeps coming out on him, and I think there's a lot more in his past that may yet come out. Terry Go, I don't know, there's a lot in his past that can come out. He is, lots going on in his past as well. But he's got tons and tons of money, which will certainly help him. Tsai is the most vetted of these candidates, so I still think that right now she has a pretty strong edge to win the election, just simply because the others are much more vulnerable to being taken down than she is, because everybody knows what her record is. She doesn't have, if she'd had a scandal, it would have come out by now, basically. So, Ke Pi, where does Ke Pi stand in this? I think that he, if he supports Go, he's not asking for much from Terry Go. And that's why there's a pretty easy matchup to be made here between Terry Go and Wen-je. So, now, Nathan Batto on another post where he talks about Hong Kong polling and how different people of different political backgrounds support or don't support the protests in Hong Kong and supporting them from here. So it's a great post. Be sure to check it out. Again, Frozen Garlic is the name of the blog. But here's what he has to say about Wen-je running for president. It's looking more and more like Ke will not run for president. I think this might be emblematic of his root problem. Ke has a lot of supporters who don't actually like the things he stands for. There are still a lot of people who traditionally support the DPP and think of him as part of the broader Green camp. However, in a presidential election, Ke cannot avoid the China question, and his strategy for dealing with China is much closer to a traditional KMT approach. Likewise, Ke gets a lot of support from young people, but his policies aren't particularly well aligned with the things that young people want. The Hong Kong protests are one example of this. People often complain about long and grueling political campaigns, but I'm concerned that this one won't be long enough. I want Tsai, Han, Ke, and Go to have to answer questions about the important questions facing Taiwan every day for several months. I want them subjected to intense scrutiny so that these sorts of contradictions are exposed. Campaigns are crucial to helping voters understand what politicians want to do. Without lengthy, intense campaigns, it is harder for voters to make good decisions. Now, I want to qualify one thing he said. I think this is all excellent. When he says that Ke is dealing with China is much closer to a traditional KMT approach. I would agree with that exactly, and use that word traditional. And by that I mean up until a few years ago. the last few years, there's been a much more Han Kuo-yu, Hong Xiu-zhu, these sorts of figures are much more pro-China than we would have seen 5 or 10 years ago out of the KMT. The traditional KMT was pro-China in the sense that they were pro-one, greater one China, but they were anti-communist. And now there seems to be a shift in the KMT, in some members at least, in some quarters, toward being more pro-communist. So Wen-je seems to be more like the KMT's old position. So I think his position toward China, and actually on a lot of issues, could be termed what I call Taipei centrist or light blue in the Taiwan political spectrum at large. So that's what's going on, I think, with these three power players. They're going to have to make a decision on what they want to do over the next 3 weeks, the next two weeks, week and a half. They're running out of time. The 17th, I believe, is the 14th and the 17th. There's a series of deadlines where you have to file your paperwork, file all of your signatures and all this. And these dates are coming up, and so it's all mid-September. And there's a lot of things that need to be done before those dates. So decisions have to be made, and things have to happen. So to get all those things in motion, they're rapidly running out of time. So watch what these three people do over the next week and a half. It's going to be really exciting. So, all right. Switching gears, going over to the MPP. The new power party is shaken. We've seen major defections. They've lost their ability to form a caucus in the legislature. Freddie Lim, Hong Zi-yong, Han Di-chiu, the party chair, have all resigned. There was a Taipei city councilwoman. She failed running for party chair, and finally, Xu Yongming, one of the two remaining legislators, and considered an ally of Huang Kuo-chang, the other remaining legislator, has won the party chairmanship. He said he's willing to talk to the KMT, the DPP, and possibly cooperate with them, but he's widely associated with Huang Kuo-chang, who definitely doesn't want to make the NPP a little green party, and he wants to chart an independent course. Xu Yongming is the one who came out before in favor of the NPP running their own presidential candidate. So right now it looks like the power in the NPP has shifted toward a more independent course. We'll see how this plays out. Now, Huang Kuo-chang has said he's not going to run for re-election in his legislative seat. So, what's he up to? Now, there's been a lot of speculation going on, and I've been hearing it from different directions now. And it was in the paper today. There's a lot of speculation about that he wants to run for Taipei mayor. I think that's a possibility. I think that he has the ego for it. He probably has the interest. And it's also a traditional stepping off point for the presidency. Before Tsai Ing-wen, the last few presidents, Ma Ying-jeou, Chen Shui-bian, and Li Denghui were all Taipei mayors prior to becoming the president. So it's considered kind of a jumping off point. It's one of the most powerful positions in the country. That wouldn't be surprising. So, however, the NPP is not quite the vehicle that it once was. And speaking to that, another poll came out, if I can find it. Okay, so this one here has, oh, sorry, wrong one. Okay, so this is a poll here. Now this is Michael Yo's organization. He's got a bit of an axe to grind. It's the Taiwan Public Opinion Foundation, but it had a couple of interesting things in it. It had here, the DPP was supported by 30.2% of respondents, the KMT by 29.6%, the TPP by 8.1%, and the New Power Party by 6.7%, the poll showed. The NPP might be on the verge of collapse as its support rate dropped by 5 percentage points from last month and was outstripped by the TPP, Yo said. So, there's that. Now, another possibility for Huang Kuo-chang is just simply that he may be calculating that it'd be easier and it would give him a lot more freedom of movement if he's not spending his time campaigning and tied to a specific district if he tries to become a party list candidate. That just may free him up to act more nationally and to build the groundwork for something else, perhaps a later run at the Taipei mayorship. Now, he may also just simply be biding his time to see what Wen-je does. He may make up his mind in reaction to what Wen-je does. So, we don't know. And he might not himself know at this point. It appeared, but he clearly doesn't want to go through the grind of another election run in Xizhi. Now, keeping in mind that he was nearly unseated in a referendum to get him thrown out. So, that may also be an issue. Now, in the same poll, here's just a little tidbit of stuff. The poll asked whether participants like Tsai, Ke, Han, U.S. President Donald Trump, and Chinese President Xi Jinping. Tsai was rated at 54.91% on the poll's feeling thermometer, with 100 being the top score possible, followed by Ke, 51.77, Trump, 50.42, Han, 40.56, which is not very good, and only slightly ahead of Xi Jinping's 36.22. So I don't really know how much I buy this whole feeling thermometer thing here, but keep coming back to Han Kuo-yu has a very solid core of support, but he's losing it. Two things are happening. He's losing independents, light blues, people who are not passionate about him to begin with, and his unfavorability seems to be going through the roof. So he's got a fanatic core who love him, and an increasingly large group of people who deeply dislike him. When your feel thermometer number comes up only slightly ahead of Xi Jinping, you probably should be a little bit concerned. So, anyway, I don't take that poll too seriously, but it's worth keeping in mind that it does seem to indicate, in a general sense, that Han Kuo-yu has some problems in unpopularity. So he's very popular with some people, very unpopular with others. All right, I'm just going to end here quickly on quoting something from Ing-wen. And it's just, there's things that can be said about her domestic policies, her military, her support for the military. There's things that can be complained about here. But the one thing where she is excellent, I think, is in her diplomacy. She was an accomplished diplomat before becoming the DPP party chair. She's really good at it. So, so the headline, and this is in RTI, Chinese criticism of arms sale is a misstatement. Tsai. And of course, I read this and went, what? Are you kidding me? China says this all the time. That just seems to be their default answer. But here's what she said. She said that upgrading, okay, so here it is, quote, I think China misspoke. We are improving our defenses in order to ensure our free and democratic way of life. This is completely within the realm of reasonability. I hope China will realize this and be a good neighbor to Taiwan. Now, obviously, if you're listening to this program, I'm sure you know, and your first thought was exactly the same as mine. Of course, China didn't misspeak. They speak like this all the time. But this quote and the way that she handles the Chinese Communist Party and the Chinese government statements is brilliant. She comes out and she doesn't say anything specific that they can hate on. And we all remember the Chen Shui-bian years where, including people in the US government, thought that Chen Shui-bian was being provocative and that China was somehow justified in being belligerent toward Taiwan because Taiwan, little tiny Taiwan, is the one being provocative. Well, Tsai learned this lesson, and so she says things that are unassailable. She knows that American audiences, who read this are going to go, well, yeah, that's right. Of course, a country is going to buy weapons to safeguard its democracy when you have a giant communist, very hostile, ethno-nationalistic state threatening to invade. It's reasonable. And the way that she says this is she makes it sound like China's they're just mistaken. We're a normal country doing normal things. And so she does this kind of soft, I'm not really sure exactly the way to say it, but she basically flips the script on China. And almost no matter what China says and does, the way that she phrases things and the way that she comes back at them, there's no way you can accuse her of being provocative. And China always comes out the one looking like they're the provocative ones, and they are the ones who are being unreasonable. And she's very, very, very good at this. All right. All right, I think that's it for today's show. I think I've gone on more than long enough on Wang Jin-pyng and Terry Go and Cohen's, as I always do. But right now, it's so exciting, and this is all going to shake out in the next couple of weeks. So, we're just going to have to see how this all works out. All right. So, Michael should be back next week. So, hope to see you then. I hope you're listening to the test podcasts. Last time, it looked like it came out pretty good. There's a noise reduction thing I need to put in the post-editing software, and that pretty much should make it as good as can possibly be. So, if you don't want to watch this on video, go ahead and listen to the podcast. All right. Look forward to seeing you next week.